Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Dr. Helen DeVita, animal communicator, spiritual teacher, and guide, reminds us that each animal that connects to us leaves fragments of their heart and soul with us. It is always an honor, and I hope they knew my heart and soul was shared with them too. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in this magical, magnanimous, magnificent, majestic, marvelous, metaphysical, miraculous, mind-awakening, mind-boggling, and mind-blowing planet of ours. This is Inspired Living Radio. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here with you yet again for another soul adventure and an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the diamonds and the many diamonds within each and every one of us, and the many diamonds and gems in our world that have yet to be discovered or revealed. So get comfortable, grab your favorite drink, kick back, sit back, or lie back. Take in a nice, deep, healing, peaceful, and cleansing breath. And let us prospect together as we're going to be discussing today's show topic, which is all about animal talks, supporting the animals we love and those who love them. So as I always like to say, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and let's discover that diamond within. And I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to, of course, all of our inspired listeners, the inspired listening community, from both here in the United States and around the globe, the universe, and beyond. My team and I here at Inspired Living Radio, again, are always so very humbled and grateful to you for listening, for downloading, for subscribing, for leaving reviews and voting to make Inspired Living Radio and podcast a best inspirational show to follow and listen to as reference and source by FeedSpot. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you. If you have not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always time to do so over on our main social media platforms. Our main show page is on Facebook. You're just going to look for the community page that says Inspired Living Radio and Podcast. You can also follow us over on Instagram and the formerly called Twitter, now called X. Just look for the name Inspired for Us. That is the number 4. You can also follow us over on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living Radio, and we are now streaming through Audible or your favorite podcast platforms, or you can simply say, Alexa, open up Inspired Living Podcast to play the latest episode. So with that, we like to say you are the inspired and the inspiration, so let's get inspired, let's inspire others, and let's inspire before we expire. Ready to go prospecting? Let's go. All right, so today's guest is joining us for the first time, and I'm going to just read a little bit about his journey and what he's been doing. And his name is Kaleel Sakakeeny. Hopefully I said that correctly. And he is an animal chaplain and a credentialed pet loss and bereavement counselor. In 2019, Animal Talks was launched as a 501c nonprofit organization committed to helping those who are suffering the pain of losing their pet to death and raising the consciousness of the animal-human relationship in the community. So what is a grief educator? They're a compassionate person committed to providing the highest level of grief support through education, experience, and insights into the often unacknowledged rocky terrain of grief. Certified grief counselors like Kaleel have completed a certificate program designed by world-renowned grief expert David Kessler, who we'd love someday to have on the show. And a little bit about Kaleel's work is he also has a BA, a MA, and an MS degree, and is also certified in Reiki, EFT, which is the emotional freedom technique, and animal communication, just to name a few, which helps him tremendously in his work with people and animals. Kaleel specializes in grief and sorrow counseling for those that have lost their pets to death, and he is very accessible and looks forward to working with either you as an individual or in a group setting. And he especially loves to work with small groups and workshops, schools, community centers, and churches, just talking about the beautiful bond between people and our animals. And if you want to learn more about today's show and what we're talking about, you can actually go to the website to learn more about Kaleel. It is called Animal Talks Inc. So Animal Talks Inc. Inc.com. And with that, welcome to Inspired Living, my friend. How are you?
Thank you very much. That's one of the best, most comprehensive introductions I've ever heard. So thank you. It's full, it's complete, it's honest, and it's accurate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, it's inspiring. We've been doing this for a long time, so we've kind of got this down, and we love to have people.
Bless you for that.
Well, and no, thank you for the work you do. I know that this, a lot of this work is depending, especially as a 501c3. A lot of this, is based on donations and awareness and bringing awareness to such a community like this. So that's why we wanted to have you on Inspired Living Radio. And one of the things that I read from your website, and I'm just quoting you here, it says, "We charge very little for the heartbreaking, critical work of helping all who reach out for comfort and support, relying most exclusively on donations. Your generosity will continue to support our healing and community work, including our work with those who are suffering the terrible pain of losing their pet companion to death." And that's end quote, Animal Talk. So again, if you want to make a donation after today's show, or you catch this on your favorite podcasting platform, you're going to go to animaltalksinc.com and get involved, get a donation going, help this beautiful community and what Kaleel's doing. And let's talk about animals. Let's talk about what's going on in the world, and let's have an inspiring show.
Yeah. Okay. Where do we begin? Where do you want to begin?
Just connect with our global audience. We've got people from all around the world that listen to this show.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit and how you got here.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. This is great. I really love doing this, and I'm really happy to be here. So, where to start? As a preface to all of this, we really emphasize in our society love and happiness and don't worry, be happy. But we forget, we really do forget that grief is the opposite side of love. That grief is love in a different suit of clothes. So we happen to live in a grief avoidant and a grief illiterate society, where the emphasis is always on feeling good, being happy, being joyful, stressing the positive. That's important. That's great. But then when the downside comes, or the upside comes, depending upon your point of view, when the love, turns into loss, we don't see that the pain of the loss is directly related to the power of the love, and that love and loss are co-joined emotions, and that we really can't separate them, and we get into serious mental and emotional and physical trouble when we try to cleave the two and say, this is love, this is joy, this is whatever, this is grief, this is loss, one is negative, one is positive. That, my friend, is really the road to pain and long-term physical and neurological and emotional angst. So that's kind of the frame for the work. Now, to answer your question more or less specifically, how this all started, it was feeling that, growing up as a kid, feeling that twin pull. Well, I love this, but then I'm going to cry when I lose it. But that's the same thing. One is an affirmation of the other. And then somewhere along the line, not so very long ago, I had a cat. And, we all love our animals. And we love our friends and we love our family. But some loves are just simply bigger than other loves. They just are. They occupy more of our spiritual space. They occupy more of our heart. And this cat, whose name was Cairo, we spelled it Kyro, was a big, black, fluffy cat who had some of the most incredibly spiritual aspects to him. That when he looked at you, you genuinely felt you were being transported into a kind of animal psyche, an animal consciousness. Plus the fact he was funny and loving. So when he died, my world changed. My reality ended as I knew it. I was lost. I was thrown. I walked around the streets. I drank too much. I stayed out late. I did stupid things trying to deal with the pain. And somewhere along the line, I hooked up with some counselors and some people, but they didn't deal with pet death. They went, it's only a cat. It's only a dog. Oh, come on, snap out of it. And I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute. There's something missing here. That this animal-human bond, if I'm feeling it, if I'm suffering the pain of having that sacred bond severed, other people must too. So where do we go from here? What do we build to help people out? And that's where we started.
And I love that. So it was that eureka moment, that light bulb moment of your pain and suffering. Went to a counselor. Counselor says, "Well, we don't really address animals, right? We only address humans." And it you know what it did, Kaleel, is it reminded me the quote from Helen Keller where she talked about, "We bereaved are not alone. We belong to the largest company in all the world, the company of those who are suffering." And I don't personally, Inspired Living was created because of my own tragedies and traumas, or the TNT that I always talk about, the grief that I had to work through. And I actually don't use the word dead anymore. Dead to me implies an ending, when we know that there is not an ending, that life does continue on after death. And so I like to use the words transitioning or passing over. So your friend and your cat has made the transition, but is still very much a part of your world. And what's so interesting with the thousands of consults I've done with either clients or students over the years, folks get sometimes more happier to talk to their fur babies than they do their actual human beings that they do, their loved ones that they do, and it's just always been fascinating to me. But you're right. What I love about animals is the dedication, the loyalty, the trust, the unconditional love. And so your eureka moment was, there's nobody in this industry that's really helping people with grief and loss of their fur babies. I'll just call them fur babies because, again, that's how some people look at it. I know that I do with my own cat. O'Malley, he's kind of the same thing. So you started this process of animal talks. How did that inspiration come? Where did that mindset, did it just drop in? You're like, oh, I'm just going to start animal talks. I'm just going to start this community. How did this build off that?
Well, what a great question. I was thinking the same thing maybe a couple of days ago. I said to my wife, Wendy, I said, I don't remember where the term animal talks came from. The whole thing, and I please don't think I'm being vague here, but it is vague. The whole process, moving from a kind of darkness to light, from a semi-ignorant state to even maybe a semi-understanding state, was just a transition that occurred in a way that I had no control over. I suddenly things fell into place. Let me put it that way in simple language. The name came, the organization came. Someone who could make it, into a 501c3 nonprofit came. It was one of those things that was so right that it was carried on the waves of thought and the spirit of rightness. So I can't answer your question beyond saying it happened, and it was right, and I was carried along with it, and that was that. Now, to go back a little bit, if you don't mind, to your point about people not dealing with pet loss or grief. In a way, therapists and medical people can't deal with loss or grief at all. Why is that, in my opinion? Well, we go back to the 17th century of René Descartes. And Descartes concluded that animals, for example, were like robots, automatons, and that he clearly separated the body from the mind. And that model of mind-body separation, mind-body-spirit separation, has plagued us in our educational system and our medical system ever since. So that grief or loss then becomes a mental health issue, but it isn't. It isn't a mental health issue. So when you have a licensed social worker or a psychiatrist, and they try to treat the sadness or the grief in our medical model, they try to fix it. They try to cure it. It's not fixable because there's nothing wrong. Nothing, maybe except the heart, is broken. So it's a spiritual issue. not a medical model issue. And that freaks the medical profession out because they can't cure it, because it's not a disease, because there's nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's, I've looked at some of the different studies when it comes to animals, and how they show compassion and empathy, which are prime examples of having a soul, right? Whether it's a dog, whether it's a horse, whether it's a cat, animals show compassion. And that's always kind of stuck with me, so that robotic sense that you're talking about from the 17th century. And you're right, in our society, especially here in the United States, we don't honor the dead, if you will. We don't, different cultures from Mexico to Japan, they celebrate the passing of their loved ones. And actually, every year they have, you have the Day of the Dead. They go out and have picnics in the graveyard. And we, as just a society, have really become numb and turned that off. And I go back to Rumi, the 12th century poet and mystic, where he talked about don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. And so, it's bringing shows like this in awareness and education to say, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to admit that you're not happy, about the passing of your cat, but also knowing that happiness is all around you if you choose to look for it and, through free will, choose to move into that. And so, for our listeners, I would say if your fur baby has transitioned on or passed over, they're still only ever a thought away, and the love and the memories you have become treasured moments. And if you just take a second to pause and take that breath in, they will show you through what I personally believe is after death communications, or ADCs. They will show you a sign, a symbol, a synergy, or a synchronistic event that they are still very much a part of your journey. And Einstein always talked about synchronicities of God's way of remaining anonymous. So here on Inspired Living, we don't get into who God is or what God is, because we cover all religious aspects and perspectives. But when you start to become aware of what is unseen, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not around us, right? And that's what we've learned in this journey. But I love that you built this community based on your experiences, but you're not sure how you got here. You're just here, and now you're on Inspired Living. I love that.
Right. You're going back a little bit again to what you said. You're absolutely right, 100% right. I am totally in agreement with you. But the problem is when people don't want to feel uncomfortable. So their impulse is make the pain go away. Fix me. Give me something. I can't stand the loss. I can't stand being plunged into despair. So when I saw all of this, I'm realizing that I need to do one other thing, because inevitably any discussion about pet loss, pet passing, pet grief, is a portal into all other kinds of grief. It's stunning because within 5 minutes of talking to someone about the death of their dog or their parakeet or their cat, suddenly they're talking about the death of their mother 15 years ago and they didn't grieve properly. Or they're talking about the end of a relationship with their boyfriend, or a divorce from their husband or wife, and they didn't mourn that. All of a sudden, the death of the pet and the grief that they're feeling in my discussions with them opens up all the other unmourned, compressed, forgotten, delayed grief that just is raising havoc with their minds and bodies. So I had to study further to expand my reach beyond, quote, pet grief and loss, end quote, into all losses, because they're all tied together. The death of a parent and the death of a cat share the same fundamental essences. They're the same thing, but people have the death of the animal as a key to unlock all those past griefs, which then come tumbling out.
Yeah, good point. And I would say, when we talk about grief as well, one of the words that we don't use is fear. And I'm just thinking of C.S. Lewis,
Right.
and you may know him from the Chronicles of Narnia, right? And he wrote a book called Grief Observed, and he talked about no one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear, right? And so it's that
about his
fear
wife,
or that Yeah, and
Right.
that ignorance is bliss kind of approach, and I don't have to feel it, therefore I don't have to work through it. And for you, being a very, reading from your bio, a very educated man, a BA, an MA, and MS degrees, how did you logically approach this? Because again, you start talking about animal communications, you start talking about animals in a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
way than what your logical education has taught you. How did you deal with that? And for our listeners, how did you work through that? And how did you become accepting of this concept of grief for our animals?
These are great questions. Absolutely, really peel me back. Really, really good. No, I mean, I haven't even thought of these questions. So what are you doing thinking of them? I should have been thinking of them. No, I mean, give me a second. Let me see. It goes back to a question I asked somebody once. I think I said, "Oh, I said, what do you believe in?" Oh, I know. Somebody asked me for the first time, "Will I meet my pet in heaven?" I'm going to get to your point. Please forgive me. It's a little way around, but
Yeah,
will I meet
yeah,
my
we have
pet
plenty of
again
time.
in heaven? I said, "Whoa." I said, "Well, what do you believe?" She said, "Well, I don't think I will. I believe I won't. That death or the passing is the end." I said, "Oh," but then she said, "But I want to believe that I will meet my pet again in heaven." I said, "Oh, what's the gap between what you believe and what you want to believe? What's what's separating your wanting to believe from becoming what you believe?" And she said, "Fear. It's fear. I don't dare believe in what I want to believe because I don't think anybody will accept it." So I did due diligence the way I think a lot of people do. I got my bachelor's, my master's, my MFA. I was going to become a teacher or researcher or whatever. And all this time, underneath that was another voice saying, wait a minute. You got the thing right as far as the system is concerned, but what do you really believe in? So it was that question that made me kind of work through that. And so I did study a lot with Vedanta. I became a Vedantist. Studied a lot on the particular Swami who unlocked my mind, made it less algorithmic, made it less binary, and enabled me to hold contradictory concepts and allowed me to be comfortable with ambiguity. And that then kind of enabled me to move forward and actualize some of my feelings and my ideas. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And
so while I'm out, so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but another fascinating thing is, why is it that we feel the death of our animal companion, that's the term I use, animal companion, animal friend, more deeply than we do sometimes the death of somebody in our family or a sibling or a parent or whatever? And every human relationship is marred by disappointment. There's infidelity, there's betrayal, there's judgment, there's criticism, differences of opinion. But you don't have that in an animal-human relationship. There's no place for criticism or judgment or disagreement or betrayal or insufficiency. It's not there. And that then sets the stage for a pure kind of love, which just simply isn't possible in human terms unless you're talking about Jesus and his love for his disciples in the world, or somebody like Damon and Pythias, or Mother Teresa. Generally speaking, human relationships are marred by human frailty, but that doesn't characterize what takes place between us and our beloved animal companions.
That's a beautiful diamond, and I'm glad you said that, because I never thought about it that way, and that's a really great perspective. And before we go to our first break, the other perspective you had talked about, because I've been asked that question myself in some of my events. Will I see my fur baby again? About seeing your animal in heaven, and I always said, and I loved how you said, what's the gap? Because it is knowing your audience and what their belief system is. And here on Inspired Living, we always like to say we're we're a smorgasbord. We're a buffet. We offer different perspectives. You don't have to agree with them. Just like when you go to a buffet, you may want some, green beans and some cream corn.
Right,
You may
right.
not like the cauliflower or the broccoli, right? And what I always remind people, and especially our inspired listeners, is heaven is not a place. It's, we think of heaven as going up and hell as going down, but if you think about it, we're on a round planet, so you can't go up or down metaphysically. It's impossible. And when you think about that, heaven is actually just a different vibration, a different frequency. It's actually a world within a world. It's right here.
Right.
And when you start to look at that, you can realize that your fur babies, your loved ones, are only ever a thought away. And that's where I talk about that after-death communications, because if you think on them, your fur baby or your loved one, watch the signs, the symbols, the synergy, and the synchronistic events. It shows you that there is a world within a world, and that heaven is not this up, far away place, and hell is not this down place. It's all right here, and it's based on perspective and awareness and vibration and frequency, which Nikola Tesla talked about all the time. If you want to unlock the secrets of the universe, you have to start thinking in terms of energy and frequency and vibration. And so that's just one perspective I want to give to our listeners. But what we're going to do real quick, Kaleel, we're going to go to our first break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the education part of it that you've gone through and the logic, because I think that's really important. Then we'll get into some more fun, inspiring questions. So stick around. We'll be back here in 2 minutes. You're listening to Inspired Living Radio. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
The future of internet radio is here. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people. Only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Give sorrow words, the grief that does not speak knits up the all wrought heart and bids it break. You know that from William Shakespeare, Macbeth. Welcome back to Inspired Living. Our guest today is Kaleel, and he is talking about his 501c, animaltalkinc.com. And Kaleel, let's just pick up, because like I said, I told you this hour goes by quick, and I'm not kidding. Before the break, we were talking about your education and how you had to change some of the way your education to this, some would call it the spiritual pathway, the woo-woo, what's Kaleel thinking? He's an animal communicator. And the reason I'm bringing this up because I was on that same path. I have a few degrees myself, and the grief and the trauma and the tragedy of losing my brothers put me on a completely different path to see the world differently and to even have this radio show today. But let's talk about that, because I'm sure people that are going through the grief of losing their loved ones or losing their fur baby, which is our focus today, let's talk about that. I mean, I know you said, there's a difference with animals because they don't, usually let us down like humans do, but how can an animal's death be compared to that of a human's in our lives? Is there a comparison, or what would you say based on those two scenarios?
If I misled anybody, I'm really sorry. I don't think you can compare. I think grief is grief is grief is grief. And anybody who attempts to say that, well, you lost a sibling, but you lost a job, but you lost a spouse, and you lost a relationship, wow. If anybody puts that in a hierarchy, then they're in serious trouble, because it's exactly the opposite of a spiritual approach, which is grief is grief. And when we are the sufferers and the experts in our own grief. So any comparisons, what does Shakespeare again say, as you quoted him to begin with? Comparisons are odious. Only a fool makes comparisons. It's a fool's errand. So no, I would never make a comparison like that. And God forbid anybody who does, because each person's pain is uniquely their pain, and though there are common denominators, each person's grief journey is his or her own grief journey. Me, in my work, I've been allowed to be a companion, only a companion, just a companion to somebody's grief journey. They lead me. I do nothing but see where they need to go to heal, not to be cured, but to heal. And I do what I can to accompany them on that journey, because it's their journey, their loss, their grief, whether it's a dog, a cat, a husband, a wife, a job, a friendship, or even health. So I hope that answers that point.
That's it's a great response, and thank you for
thank you for the question.
Saying that, because
thank you.
You're welcome. Because it is, you can't put a label on grief. It's different for everybody.
Right.
I remember when my brothers had passed, they talked about, time will heal. It's been 20 years and it's still just as relevant as it was 20 years ago today. But it's kind of like the same thing with air, right? Air is air, but we all breathe it differently. Some of us just kind of inhale lightly. Some of us breathe in that prana, that life force, very deeply. And it's all based on, what you want to do with your grief. Do you want to tuck it away, push it down? Or do you want to acknowledge it and move through it? And that leads me to my next question is, what happens, in your opinion, in your professional opinion, your expertise, what happens if we don't grieve the death of a pet properly?
Right. Well, if I'm going in the wrong direction or being too personal, let me know. But in your grief, did you seek help?
In my grief? Oh, yeah. Now, not right away. As I was 27 years old when my brothers passed. And so part of my ego, part of my arrogance, part of my cockiness was, I don't need help. I can just rub some dirt on it. Don't reach out for help, because that, in today's society, or back then, that's considered more of a weakness. But since then, yes, I've done everything from biofeedback to hypnotherapy to grieving counseling, and have really worked through that. But that's important. That's an important note to point out. But it took me a couple years, which caused me a lot of harm along the way. Yeah.
But you lost two brothers? Did you say?
So 20 years ago, my little brother was murdered, and then 3 days later, my older brother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in the same week, and that's the trauma and the tragedy, the TNT that I talk about a lot. And I'm very open to talk about it personally, especially here with our followers around the world. But what it did is it not only changed me, it opened me up to have a different perspective and take a different journey than where I was going with my education and my degrees. And it took me a long time to logically move into the spiritual path because of what I've been taught from our education system. So now I combine them together to bring, topics like today's show of Inspired Living and your expertise to talk about people to say, yes, you can be very educated, and yes, you can listen to your higher self. Like you said, you're not sure where it came from, but you were listening to your higher voice. You were listening to your higher self, and you followed. You didn't have to, but you followed through free will and choice to create Animal Talk Inc., which is now a 501c3 company helping people around the world. So that had to have been born somewhere. I call that the diamond within. You followed it and you trusted it. Not everybody does that. Not everybody trusts that and follows that because it's not seen. I got to see it before I believe it. When I actually teach the opposite, believe it from inside, reveal the diamond, then you start to see it, then you start to achieve it. So that's why,
that's very helpful to me. That is really very helpful to me because sometimes, to be frank, somebody will say to me, well, where did this come from? And then sometimes I feel stupid or silly because I'll say, I really don't know.
I don't know.
My conscious mind, I don't know. What am I going to say? I was guided. I could say that, but you really helped clarify it by suggesting that there was a truth moving through me. I don't know how you say that to people. I guess you just sort of do, I suppose. I don't know.
It's that gut feeling, right? I refer to it as, we talk about intuition, right? We talk about the tuition that we've paid to go to schools externally, but we bypass and forget about our own intuition, investing in ourselves, listening to ourselves, trusting ourselves. And so that's why I use the word intuition. And there's a lot of things that have been missed in our culture because people weren't willing to trust and listen to their higher selves or their intuition. And again, think about it. If you wouldn't have listened to your own intuition and followed this path, you would not have created Animal Talks Inc. And you and I would not be talking today, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, extremely. So now I forget your question.
Yeah, no worries. And that's what I love about these shows is because there's no script, right? It's very
right.
So how can what happens? What happens if you don't grieve the death of your pet? What are some of the negative aspects?
It's so funny because let's say you have whether it's a pet or whether it's a person, your mind. Your mind is created based upon the rhythms of that life. So how you come in the door, what time you eat, what you like, where you go, what you do, whatever. And then all of a sudden that person or the animal is not there, and your mind is constructed a reality around that life. It's like putting a car in neutral and pressing on the accelerator. You say, the mind says, hey, wait. I'm doing everything I've been doing for 20 years, 30 years, whatever, and now there's no reason to do it anymore. So when people say they have lost their minds, it feels like they've lost their minds when they're in the depths of grief. They really have. They've lost the mind that they had in relationship to that person or that animal for as long as they lived together. And they really have to reconstruct a new mind. But if they continue to fight to hold on to the old mind and the old ways of being, which is to say they're not grieving the loss of that, then serious trauma develops physically, neurologically, emotionally, because they're in a world that doesn't exist, and they become marginally, if not more than marginally insane, and they become sick and unwell because they're forcing a world that doesn't exist anymore to exist instead of moving forward, not moving on, moving forward toward a new hope and a new reality. So without grieving fully and creatively and completely, we get stuck in a world that doesn't exist, in a reality that no longer has any value or purpose or existence. And that's harmful.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that. It was just, we were talking about intuition, and I'm thinking back to, the great Steve Jobs, the creator of Apple and a lot of the modern technology we have today, and he talked about how your time is limited. So for our listeners out there, your time is limited. So don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. Just like Kaleel, listen to his inner voice, and most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. And that's from Steve Jobs. And as you were saying that, I'm just like, yeah, this is a reminder to myself. So thank you for that. That reminder back to me is a big part of the work that I do is being able to trust and follow that, even though there's a lot of opinions out there and a lot of critics out there that talk about this. But yeah, animals are freaking amazing. I love every animal that's come into my life and has been a part of my life and has transitioned on, but is yet still a part of my life because they're only ever a thought away. So
what do you think? Sorry, so what do you think in this process of trusting yourself, of believing in yourself, of listening to the inner voice? What's your opinion about seeking help from other people or finding teachers that can help bring that forward and out of you or help you activate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's about one, becoming aware of where you're currently at in your life. Awareness is the greatest agent for change. Eckhart Tolle talks about this all the time. So it's becoming aware. And then moving through, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, about manifesting, about accepting, about surrendering, about, not listening to everything the ego wants to tell us in this crazy, chaotic world of ours. Meditation is a big part of that, moving into that silence to listen, because the same word of listen is the anagram of silent, right? So moving into silence to listen to that. And then when the teacher appears, the synchronicities that I keep talking about, I have had so many great mentors and teachers along my path that have helped me see perspective. And like I said, you have a quote from Dr. Helen DeVita, animal communicator, spiritual teacher, and guide, on your website. And when I saw that, I said, what a small world. She's actually a friend and a mentor that I've studied under at the Arthur Findlay College in Stansted, England. So it's a small world, but to answer your question, it's about, first becoming aware that you want to seek something, that diamond within. And then when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And when the teacher does appear, make sure to tuck back that ego and your opinions and learn to listen and transform, because the caterpillar doesn't become the butterfly until it goes through the metamorphosis of a very troubling, disturbing, severe cocoon phase, and life is no different. So that's how
that is so different, though, right? That is so difficult.
Yeah, it is.
So difficult because we continually judge. We're always judge. Well, I don't like this. His approach is wrong. Her attitude. I don't know how you. Sometimes I just think you really have to trust to get to that point of non-judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. Imagine the world with non-judgment. Imagine with the current state of the world right now, right? Imagine if we could, I'm trying to think, right off the top of my head, it was something that Walter Cronkite had said years ago. So you remember Walter Cronkite when he was, the TV anchor. Yeah, and he talked about, war itself is, of course, a form of madness. It's hardly a civilized pursuit. It's amazing how we spend so much time inventing devices to kill each other and so little time working on how to achieve peace. And if we could change our mindsets, peace is the only battle worth fighting, in my opinion, in today's society. That is worth the fight. And, there's just so much going on in our world. And then you add the grief on top of that. Maybe you're listening to this show today and you just recently lost a loved one, or you recently lost your fur baby, your favorite cat, your favorite dog. And you're thinking, wow, how do I move forward? But grief is not a timeline. Let's talk about that real quick, because that's one of the questions I have for you. What's the expectation of a timeline? How long do you expect people to grieve when they've lost a fur baby?
Well, in a way, it's a great setup because you said to the audience if they have recently lost. And I would just, you're right. I would just amend that to say, if you have ever lost, whether you have ever lost 20 years, 30 years, 50 years ago, and you haven't processed that, you haven't grieved that loss. So the timeline, there is no timeline. It's like a circular, it has its own, grief has its own way of moving. Sometimes it reminds you of a spiral staircase where you stand at one place and your perspective is different, move a few steps up and your whole landscape. So it's just like a winding kind of. So it is. I try to tell people it isn't like. Will say to me, well, I lost my dad, 20, 30 years ago, and I was 15 years old. But that's still a present, real, felt loss. Yep. It doesn't matter 10 minutes ago, 30 years ago. If that grief hasn't been worked through, it's still very real and very present.
Yeah, and I when I was going through this, I was reminded through my my counseling and my biofeedback and my hypnotherapy that grief becomes a part of you, right? There's no time. Grief doesn't have a calendar. It doesn't punch a clock and say, oh, I'm gonna start at this time and end at this time. It's always a reminder that the grief actually becomes a part of who you are instead of dragging it like a heavy suitcase behind you your entire life. Make it a part of you, and then you grow around your grief, and you don't succumb to the grief, but you work through it to where that grief is a part of you. And a lot of people that have been on this show, and we've been on the air for over 8 seasons, have gone through that grief and turned that grief into inspiration to serve, to teach, to help others, to serve mankind. And that's what I personally believe to now, in this day and age, is my grief back then, even though horrible, allowed me to move into the space that I am now, to create inspiration, to create love and compassion, perspective, because I know what it's like to suffer. And those of us that have suffered, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? We're survivors, and then we go forward to create that vibration. And that's what you're doing with Animals Talk Inc., right?
But that's what you did. Obviously, no one would say to you, they would say to you, hey, look, Marc, would you rather your brothers lived? Of course you'd rather your brothers lived.
Of course, yeah.
Of course you would. I'm sure you would give up the show in a minute if you had to, if your brothers were alive. But you took that pain and that grief, and it made you more compassionate. It opened your heart. You didn't resolve the loss. You reconciled it. And this is where you are now. So that loss and grief, you took it and turned base metal into gold. You alchemized your grief.
Alchemy.
Now, would you rather? Would you rather they were still alive? Of course, God willing, they would be alive. But that didn't happen to you, and it doesn't happen to a lot of us.
Right. So you take that TNT, the trauma and tragedy that blew my life up, and you turn it into that TNT, right? I'm thinking of like a prospector standpoint, the Intuitive Prospector. I took that TNT and I blew stuff up so I could reveal that gold and those diamonds that are hidden deep down in the earth, right? That's that TNT blowing stuff up to reveal the good things. Yeah.
Some people don't know how. They believe in it. They're still struggling, and it's painful to watch.
Yes, and that's why they listen to the show. That's why they come to your site at animaltalksinc.com, and that's why they go to marclainhart.com, is because they see and they hear and they understand that we've gone through this. And then again, we're the teachers, and when we appear for the students are ready. And when the student is done and becomes the teacher goes on to inspire the student. So now I told you this show goes by quick. It's
already
the last part of the show here, but I want to because of the timing of having you on, because the holidays are literally right around the corner, right? So what are some tips that you can do for someone that's coping with loss of a fur baby, of a pet during the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's? What would you recommend some tips?
It's the best question in the world. It really is. It's the best question, both of you. You're asking it because I wrote a piece called "Are the Holidays Without Your Loved One?" It was published somewhere, I think, by Belvoir Press in New York. But Wow, that is because all of a sudden, just talking about, let's say, Christmas in a Christian sense, anyway, or Hanukkah or whatever, the candles don't burn as brightly, the tree isn't as sweet, and because you're missing a loved one with all your heart and soul, you have to give yourself permission to not participate. You have to say, I'd like to skip this Christmas dinner. I don't want to go caroling. I don't want to light the candle. I need a grief break. I'll go take a walk. So you have to allow yourself to trust your feelings and allow yourself to have your feelings motivate you. If you don't want to participate and you want to hold back because it's easier and more healing for you, then you got to do it. And that's what happens. You just can't be forced or allow yourself to be swept along in, the craziness of the holiday season, as beautiful as they are.
And to follow up on that, if somebody wants to seek you out and go to your website, how do you know if one-on-one grief counseling, the counseling that you give, and what you do, how do you know that it's right for you, for one of those listeners out there?
That's interesting. What I do, which is I don't think any other therapist or counselor does, I ask people to write me a story about, tell me the story, where they were when this event happened. Tell me a little bit about their relationship to their loved one. Tell me some favorite moments, some highlights. Tell me what you learned from each other. So they don't want to do that. They want to jump right into therapy and say, hi, I have a problem. Can you help me? No, I need to know from you where you're coming from and what happened. And even in the process of writing the letter to me, that's a therapeutic and a cathartic experience. And based upon what I see, I then said, look, I think we should really meet and talk. But I don't like to go beyond 3 sessions because then it becomes potentially habitual. And I don't like that. I like to just work with a person's pain and see if we can give them a direction, see if I can companion them to make less pain. So we don't go from pain to no pain. We go from pain to less pain to less pain to less pain. Like we don't go from wrong to right. We go from right to higher right to higher right to higher right. And so based upon what they give me in their feedback and their personal letters, I kind of make that decision.
No, I love that. And I love that you only do the 3 sessions. I'm path with the work that I do as a medium. I only do a few sessions and then because it doesn't become a crutch or a habit, and
exactly right.
Constantly want to talk to your loved ones. But with the sake for the sake of time, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us.
My pleasure.
And what I like to do is ask my guests of Inspired Living, who inspires you in your journey today? Either a what or a who.
That's not to me, right? No, that's to your guest.
No. Yep. That's for you.
Oh, it's for me. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, you're my guest. So.
I thought you meant I'm sorry.
No problem.
Who or what? Well, again, the fact to the original point, the passing of my cat he inspired me. His courage and his sickness, his his guts, his courage, his love, his profound love, I guess, partly that. A Swami that I studied with for many years who would always just sort of gently pat the air when I was distressed, gently pat the air and say, it's all right, it's all right, it's all right. And he'd try to touch my leg. And in that moment, I felt a kind of great peace and tranquility. And the questions I had to ask him seemed trivial and unnecessary because he already gave me the answer before I asked the question through his touch.
I love that. Well, Kaleel, thank you so much for being our guest today on Inspired Living.
My pleasure.
And if you want to work with Kaleel Sakakeeny, you can go to animaltalkinc.com. It's also posted on our social media pages, and I hope that you will reach out to him if you are going through the stages of grief. We talked about I'm thinking of the stages of death and dying. The last one is acceptance. And grief, even though hard, Voltaire talked about this. Tears are the silent language of grief. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow talked about there is no grief like the grief that does not speak. So make sure that you're working through your journey of grief, getting that connection, that therapy, that counseling, whatever that may be. As Queen Elizabeth II reminds us, grief is the price we pay for love. And I know that we love our fur babies. And I will leave it with what Keanu Reeves, if you ever seen The Matrix, he always talked about grief changes shape, but it never ends. So it's about moving with that grief and making it a part of you and living your life in memory of those and doing the things that, whether it's a fur baby or a loved one, doing those things that they love to do in life and remind you that they're only ever a thought away. So again, Kaleel, thank you so much for being on Inspired Living.
Amen, Mark. Will you send the link to the show so we can promote it?
Yeah, it'll be, and also for our listeners, we'll send you the link for sure. I'll have my team do that. And it will be streaming. Inspired Living now is streaming through all of your favorite podcasting platforms, so we're easily found. You just type in Inspired Living and look for my ugly mug, and this show will definitely be up. And it's titled Animal Talks, Supporting the Animals We Love and Those Who Love Them. So again, thank you, Kaleel. And
thank you.
God bless you, my friend.
All the best. Take care. God bless you. Bye.
All right. All right. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate, and most importantly, wherever you're at and what's going on in this world, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live. And I hope that you'll discover the diamond within. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time here on Inspired Living. Namaste.